to everyone on Zoom. Good morning to everyone here. It's so nice to see you today. Welcome to our service. I am Tracy Weiser, and I'm going to be your worship partner today. And I want to welcome you all to Westminster and to Westminster on Zoom. Pleased to welcome our worship leader for today, Reverend Eric Cherry. He's the minister of First Universalist Society in Franklin, Massachusetts, where he has served since August 2018. Previously, Reverend Eric served as the director of the Unitarian Universalist Association's International Office, managing the UUA's relationships with UU and interfaith partners around the world, providing resources for congregational international engagement and supervising the staff of the UU Holding India program and the UU United Nations office. Before that, Reverend Eric served UU congregations in Burlington, Iowa, and northeastern Massachusetts. Reverend Eric is a graduate of Earlham College and Meadville Lombard Theological School. He and his wife, Linda, who we're so happy to have with us also today, make their home in Mansfield, Massachusetts. Welcome, Reverend Eric. Our chalice lighting marks the beginning of our worship service. I will light mine and share our reading. And then if you are online, I invite you to light yours if you have one. And if you like, you can use the chat function to post the name of the street where you are relighting your chalice. We light this chalice in the warmth of friendship and the never-ending search for truth.
Greetings, one and all. Good morning. It's good to be with you here this morning. And to be with folks who are joining the congregation over Zoom, welcome. It's good to be together, to be immeasurably near, whether we are here at the church or gathering together via Zoom. I am Eric Cherry. I do serve as the minister at First Universalist Society in Franklin, Massachusetts, and I'm so grateful to be your guest this morning. I want to thank you for the many kindnesses and for the hospitality. And I'm especially grateful to your wonderful minister, my colleague, Reverend Ellen Quadgrass, who serves you and our movement with commitment and wisdom and grace. And I regard it as a privilege to be invited to share Reverend Ellen's pulpit and yours this morning. This pulpit exchange with Reverend Ellen happened because of an interesting happenstance this past July that I want to share a little bit about with you. I had taken up an invitation to serve as the minister of the week at one of our UU camps and conference centers, the historic gathering place for Universalists in America, Ferry Beach. And it was a lovely week, made lovelier by the fact that the camp nurse, Sue Farrell, was there as well. And so I connected with Sue during that week and enjoyed getting to know Sue very much. And we started talking about our Unitarian Universalist connections, and she mentioned Westminster, and I let her know that I had some connections here as well. And those connections are really with two people who are dear friends, but for whom describing them as dear friends is really not quite enough to say. These are two people who I feel as though have known me since before I was born, originators of the congregation that I was raised in, people that made a congregation in Stony Brook, New York, because they knew that someday people would need it. And my family was one of those families that did. They were with me through childhood children's chapels and through youth group days. And it was such a memorable occasion, such a wonderful surprise that they came out to Burlington, Iowa 25 years ago this spring to join me and the congregation there for my ordination and to present me with the stole that I'm wearing this morning. When you see the stole, I'm probably giving away who these two people are. I share this background with you with only a light intention to embarrass Tom and Margaret Townsend, as I know that they never seek the spotlight themselves. But more importantly, as a reminder to all of us that each of us is being shepherded, companioned by people impersonating angels throughout our lives. That we are saved by these connections intentionally and unintentionally throughout our lives. And that each of us here this morning and gathered on Zoom are called to that very work. To be, to become, and to belong for similar purposes. And this morning, we lift up that universalist calling heard at Ferry Beach, at the UU Fellowship at Stony Brook, in Franklin, Massachusetts, here at Westminster Unitarian Church, and in every ear that is able to hear. May that be a blessing indeed. And in that spirit, we gather now for worship, and I'd like to invite you to join in singing our opening hymn, which is Where Do We Come From? Nonetta's gonna lead us in singing it, and I believe we're going to continue to wear masks as we do, but you are welcome to rise in body or in spirit as you're able.
Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going?
Please stay standing as we join in our Unison Affirmation found in the order of service or in the chat. Love is the spirit of this church and service our mission. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please be seated.
I'd like to invite you to join me in a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer, especially as we witness, as we recognize the joys and sorrows that have been shared, these valleys, these peaks, these important moments in our lives, these ways that we are present to each other in experiences that are both expressed and those that are not, but which are present and real in the immensity of the struggle and the recoveries that happen throughout our lives. Holding these joys and sorrows, I would also share a prayer written by Mike Adams, who resides in Los Alamos, New Mexico. He is a Lilwat Indian from British Columbia, Canada. And Mike is a second generation UU and a member of the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos. This is the prayer Mike shares for this day before Indigenous Peoples Day. For the generations who survived being hunted, who endured the theft and destruction of our people's lands, and who persevered through the theft of and indoctrination of our children, we are grateful that you survived and for the resilience you have passed on to us. Because you did these things, we are still here. For the activists who stood against corruption and who forced the spotlight onto our people's mistreatment, we are grateful for your commitment. Because of it, we are still here. For the people who never consented to the sacrifices that were forced from you, we remember you. We mourn your suffering and loss. We honor you as we can. We do this because we are still here. For the future generations, we ask that you remember. We look to you and keep our people's future alive after we're gone. We ask you to find strength in your ancestors and use the resilience of your people to create your future and that of your children. We ask you to ensure that when we are gone through you, we are still here. Amen. And may we witness this prayer of remembrance and hope as a gathered community today, in this important day where our responsibilities for being, becoming, and belonging are lifted up. So may it be. And please remain seated now as we join together in the sung response to the meditation, which is meditation on breathing.
Here at Westminster, we share our offering every month with a different organization that values our mission. This month, we share half of our undesignated offering with our very own Sharing Locker, one of Westminster's outreach projects that has been in operation since February of 2010. We reach out to anyone in Washington or Kent County, as well as Cranston residents who are experiencing a need for assistance by offering household goods, a seasonal farmer's market, and or pet food. The sharing locker is, by design, closely aligned with Westminster's vision and mission. The sharing locker has continued to serve clients even during the pandemic. The other half of our offering goes to support all of the other good work of this community. You can donate using the link that is now being posted in the chat. If you are here in person, we ask that you use your cell phone to click on the donate button on the Westminster website, or you can leave your offering in the table on the box after service. The offering will now be given and received with gratitude. I invite you all to join me in our responsive reading today. Earth Teach Me from the Ute Indians of North America. Earth, teach me stillness as the grasses are stilled with light. Earth, teach me suffering as old stones suffer with memory. Earth, teach me caring as parents who secure their young. Earth, teach me courage as the tree which stands all alone. Earth, teach me limitation as the ant which crawls on the ground.
Earth, teach me freedom as the
Eagle which soars in the sky. Earth, teach me resignation as the leaves which die in the fall. Earth, teach me regeneration as the seed which rises in the spring. Earth, teach me to forget myself as melted snow forgets its life. Earth, teach me to remember kindness as dry fields weep with rain.
The responsive reading we just shared from our hymnal is indeed attributed to the Ute people. And it's a beautiful and a profound sentiment that is shared. Some of you know that there is an accompanying volume for our hymnals. It's called Between the Lines. And it says a little bit about each of the hymns and the readings that are included in the hymnal. And I turned to it in preparation for sharing this responsive reading this morning. And there isn't really anything there about how attribution to the Ute people is sourced for this reading, but there is a bit about the Ute Indians, of how they once populated plains in the southwest of what is now the United States, and how Utah is named for this tribe. And there's a bit about their governance and their economy. Somehow, I thought that there would be more, though it's not a great surprise that there isn't. When the accompanying volume for our hymnal was published in 1995, we had barely begun as a people of faith to scratch the surface of what it means to acknowledge the legacy of colonialism and empire, both generally and for Unitarian Universalists. It was not uncommon among Unitarian Universalists, as with Americans generally, to pretend as though Native peoples had simply vanished, that they were history, not presence, not future. Renaming the holiday tomorrow Indigenous Peoples Day is an acknowledgement that this tendency was wrong-sided and that culture can change in the hope of a tomorrow that is better than today, of the possibility for being, becoming, and belonging to shift. But it is endlessly puzzling to me that there isn't a word of acknowledgement in the hymnal or the supplement to the hymnal about how Unitarian and Ute people crossed paths in the 1870s. Maybe you know that the US government invited American denominations, including Unitarians, to run mission schools during that era. The purpose was described this way: to save them, in this case, the Ute people, from trickery, robbery, intemperance, and other vices of frontier life, and to present them with the better phases of a Christian civilization. Not that the Ute had asked, not that the Ute people could have prevented this effort, not that colonizing was the driving force of trickery, robbery, intemperance, and the other vices of frontier life. But the American Unitarian Association accepted the mission and worked with the Ute tribe in Colorado from 1870 to 1876. I suppose it isn't surprising that we, I mean, Unitarian Universalists, would much prefer to see the beautiful words in the responsive reading this morning rather than face the legacy of that interaction, and a similar one that took place with the Crow people in Montana during the 10 years that followed. Now, if you are aware of these 19th century endeavors, it may be because in 2009, UUA President William Sinkford used the occasion of our annual denominational meeting, our General Assembly, to offer a formal apology to the Ute tribe for Unitarians' historical complicity in crimes and violence against the Ute people. We were gathered in Salt Lake City that year, and it felt to Reverend Sinkford that the time was right for this. Reverend Sinkford stated, "We participated, however ineptly, in a process that stole your land and forced a foreign way of life on you. We ask for your forgiveness, and we promise to stand with you as you chart your way forward." It's a coincidence that I was on the GA stage when this happened, as the apology and the acceptance by Ute tribe leader Forrest Kutch was included in a special worship service that I had a small role in. And like most people, I felt like I was witnessing and learning something about my people, those to whom I belong, which also meant something about who I was, my being, and what I and we were becoming. And that is with me today as we worship together and as Indigenous Peoples Day arrives in broader awareness tomorrow than perhaps ever before. It's a beginning and an important one, something to commit to continuing, to accomplishing some restitution, some reconciliation around before we don't have a chance to. It's something like an item on a very important bucket list. Bucket lists. Maybe you've seen some of the more popular items that make their way onto bucket lists on the internet. And frankly, I think some of them are pretty good. For example, make some vanilla pudding, put it in a mayonnaise jar, go out in public and eat it with a spoon. Hire 2 private investigators and get them to follow each other. Wear a shirt that says life and hand out lemons on the street corner. Get into a crowded elevator in pre-COVID times and say, I bet you're all wondering why I gathered you here. Run into a store, ask what year it is. When somebody answers, yell, it worked, and run out screaming. Become a doctor and change your last name to Acula. Change your name to Simon and speak in the third person. Buy a parrot, teach the parrot to say, help, I've been turned into a parrot. Not very profound, but a heck of a lot of fun and pretty harmless. And during these challenging days, a bucket list that amuses oneself and others is more of a ministry, more of a mitzvah than perhaps it has been in a very long time. So worth a thought or two. But there is a religious caution that these kinds of items and many other bucket list items tend to reflect and to tempt people toward self-absorption, hedonism, and that frightful philosophy that they who die with the most toys or the most activities crossed off their bucket list somehow win. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Instead, these lists can keep us on the path of doing more essential life projects. They can remind us of the preciousness of life, the fact that not one of us is promised another year or month or a day, and that attending to the gift that life is possible, even constructive, that being, becoming, and belonging is one of the life projects that deserves a place on a bucket list. Being, becoming, and belonging, which can be restated as faithful response to 3 questions. Who are you? What path are you on? And who are your people? These are 3 questions to sit with more than to answer. 3 issues that might be referenced on a typical bucket list, but which aren't tasks you can accomplish or cross off. Instead, they're bucket list items to be aware of, to know, and to see. The gift of these is their challenge. Another fortunate truth about life projects is that it's never too late to engage them. They can serve as much purpose in your 20s as in your 90s. And let me say a little bit more about each of these: being, becoming, and belonging. The matter of being, the question is, who are you? And the related question is, who do they say that you are? The project is about self-understanding. Do you know what you value, and are those values portrayed in your life? A friend and a father once described to me how difficult he found it to hide truths from his children, which they were perhaps developmentally not ready to hear yet. From something as simple and perhaps as innocent as dispelling the Santa Claus myth, or more challenging, like the details of a crime or a family secret. To him, hiding these truths felt like a kind of lying to his children, something he was very uncomfortable about because a grounding commitment of his life, something that he believed defined his sense of being, was honesty and truth-telling. But he described how he came to believe that there is a higher purpose in parenting, a higher purpose that he calls integrity. Sometimes integrity, he said, trumps complete honesty. And though I've never been a parent, I think I know what he means. And the Being Project is about things like this. What are your guideposts in life? What do you identify as your primary commitments that make you who you are? And how do you display them in such a way that others can see that you live by them? It's different than claiming that honesty is your guidepost and failing to live up to it. It's different. It's understanding how even a central tenet like honesty can lead you to face a moral challenge, and that who you are, who you intend to be, can face that. For my friend, this was a yet deeper foundational question about integrity. For you, it may be otherwise, but the being piece of this life project is about bringing that up to consciousness, to knowing it, to living it. A related piece of this project is also about being comfortable in your own skin, being satisfied, being present. You know the Zen story about the monk who was chased over a cliff by a tiger, and the monk grabs a weak branch and holds on for dear life, glancing below. And below him, he sees another tiger pacing and waiting for him to fall. Meanwhile, he notices that a mouse is slowly munching through the branch that he's hanging from. And suddenly he notices a perfect strawberry, takes it and eats it and enjoys it like he's never enjoyed anything before. That's a Zen story about the being piece of this life project. Secondly, the matter of becoming. I'd like to introduce it with an old story that was told in the newsletter of the East Shore UU Church and then retold by Reverend Jane Zhebka in Quest, the newsletter of the Church of the Larger Fellowship. There was a young man who went to seminary to study to become a rabbi. And in the middle of the first year, he became discouraged and lost his faith. And so he went to his rabbi and said, I have to leave the seminary. I lost my faith in God. I don't believe in the Bible or the Jewish laws. The rabbi listened and then said, let me tell you a story. He went on. About 20 years ago, when I was a student at the seminary, I lost my faith and I went to one of my professors and said to him, Professor, I have to leave the seminary for I've lost my faith in God. I no longer believe in the Bible and the Jewish laws. His professor said to him, let me tell you a story. About 20 years ago, I studied to be a rabbi and I lost my faith in God and the Bible and the Talmud. I didn't know what to do. I finally went to the head of the seminary, a tall, saintly man with a white flowing beard and piercing black eyes. I said to him, Father, Rabbi, teacher, I am ashamed to come to you for the purpose I have in mind, but I have to leave the seminary. I've lost my faith in God and no longer believe in the Jewish laws. I have to go. The kindly man put his arm around me and said, "Sit down. I have to tell you a story." Becoming is not about identifying a place or a way of life that you crave and achieving it. It's about being aware, or as Buddha said, about being awake, about noticing that a life path opens and twists and turns for you. It's about developing the artistry to adjust, to admit when something is not healthy, and perhaps to discover that a loss of trust in a previously established grounding can be recovered from. Becoming means having the courage to emerge from comfort. It means the ability to risk today for tomorrow. And I hope it's a comfort to know that not only in Jewish seminaries, but for people that are seated near you today and with you on Zoom, this has been the life story of many of your neighbors. Thirdly, the piece of this project referred to as belonging. My friend and colleague, Reverend Kathleen McTeague, shared a story in her UUA meditation manual from Shine and Shadow that brings a part of this project into focus. She reflected on the beauty and the poignancy of New England graveyards, especially the epitaphs that appear on some of them. And she wrote, "The engraved cries of lament, like 'Farewell, beloved daughter,' evoke a tug of grief even now, though the people named have been dust and earth for 200 years or more. One of these graveyards in my town," she wrote, "evokes a sadness of a different sort, held in the inscription of a modern tombstone marking the resting place of Franklin F. Bailey. He was born in 1901 and buried in 1988, so he lived a long time. His epitaph says simply, 'Here lies a man that nobody really knew.'" In a related way, a few years back, I learned that a parishioner of mine from a previous congregation had passed away. Now, this person had long departed that congregation, and we hadn't been in touch after I had moved on, but I knew him in those earlier days as a financially successful but emotionally troubled man, a man who felt that life had not been kind to him, that he had been dealt an unfair hand of cards. He had a brother, but they were not close. Unmarried, he considered and pursued a spouse from another country through an online service, which ended in only more pain. He came to our congregation in those days seeking community, a sense of belonging, and I think he found that there. He wouldn't have described himself as being on a spiritual journey, but he came to Bible study because he liked, as he said, to look for the loopholes. He made friends, he took care of people, he contributed to the community. From where I stood, he was attending to this call of belonging, even in the midst of many challenging truths of his life. And I had great respect for that. And when I learned that he died, I wondered whether his epitaph would be like the one that Reverend McTeague had noticed in the graveyard near her town. And I hope not, but I could not say for sure. Now, belonging is not, of course, strictly about finding a spiritual community. It's more about staying connected when times are hard. And times become hard for many reasons. COVID is perhaps the most obvious one right now. But times also become hard when we find that we have to have the courage, even the fearlessness, to look back on our religious past, our complicity, even in terror, especially when current examples of atrocities committed by religious people missionizing Native people are front page stories. It makes it hard to stay. It makes it hard to belong. But to be a part of something that matters, even when it's hard, even when it asks for more than you knew that you could give, in order that your being might be known, in order that your becoming might have the space that it needs. Well, that kind of belonging is precious beyond words. And I trust that finding it here at Westminster is indeed a great blessing. May you have the courage at any age, at every age, to engage this project of being, becoming, and belonging. May it be powerful and enriching, even when it's a confounding struggle. And may you come to know and see how the sense of integrity, of having become, and of being a part of something marvelous is a gift of faith that leads us on. May it be so. And amen. And I'd like to invite you to join me now in singing our closing hymn, which is number 1020 in the Teal hymnal, Wayaya. And we're going to remain seated. No, we're going to rise in body or in spirit, remain masked as we lift our voices in singing Wayaya. Our closing words adapted from Reverend Rebecca Parker. Draw near to each other to know the endeavor shared, the heritage passed on, the companionship of struggle, the importance of keeping faith, the life of ritual and praise, the comfort of human friendship, the company of earth, the chorus of life welcoming you. None of us alone can save the world. Together, that is another possibility just waiting. In that spirit, we go in peace.